Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the CURT Trailer Hitch Receiver on a 2023 Cadillac XT4. Now this is what your hitch is going to look like when it's installed, and that's the great part about this one is it sits far enough back that when you do need to use it, you can simply twist the two plastic knobs on the cover, pull this out, and then you're ready to go. But when not in use, this panel goes back on and it's completely hidden. But taking a closer look at the hitch, it's going to be a 2" by 2" receiver tube opening, which is pretty much the standard size for a bunch of different accessories. So if you're looking for ball mounts, bike racks, or cargo carriers, there's plenty of options available for this hitch. Now when you put those accessories in, you're going to need a 5/8 pin and clip to allow those to stay in place. And the hitch does not come with one. A lot of your accessories will come with the pin and clip, so that's something to look for. But if you want to pick up a locking one, that way you can load your accessories up, lock it in place, and know that it's not going to walk away in the hands of someone else, then we have plenty of options available here at eTrailer. Now we do have rolled style safety chain loops that are nice and open, so your normal S-style hook or larger clevis style hook will be easy to hook up when putting your trailer safety chains on. Now speaking of towing, this has some decent ratings with a gross trailer weight rating of 4,000 pounds, and that's going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded onto it. And as far as tongue weight, which is going to be the pressure that's put here on the receiver tube opening, that's going to be a lot of your suspended accessories like your cargo carriers or bike racks. It's coming in at 400 pounds, which is pretty good. So that means you can load up some, e-bike bike carriers and both the bikes and still be under that threshold. Now before you hook up and tow, you do want to check the vehicle's owner's manual and see what it's capable of towing, and then compare that with the numbers on the hitch, and that way you're not overloading either one of them, so just take the lowest number. Now let's go ahead and measure from the center of the hitch pin to the furthest point of the rear fascia, and this is going to help determine with your folding accessories which ones you're going to want to pick to make sure it still has clearance. And we're coming in right at about 4 inches, and this is also important to note for when choosing a ball mount to make sure that it sticks out far enough, that way you can hook up your trailer and not make contact with the fascia. Now as far as your ground clearance, measuring from the top of the receiver tube opening to the ground is coming in at 18 inches, which is a decent amount of ground clearance. It's also important to determine if you need a rise or a drop for your ball mount, so you can measure the coupler on your trailer and then adjust accordingly to match your hitch height. Now something to keep in mind as well is when you do have suspended accessories on here like the cargo carrier bike rack, as you go up an incline that is going to want to tilt towards the ground, so just kind of keep that in mind when going up a big incline or maybe on some little more rougher terrain. But with 18 inches you should clear most things. Now in terms of installation, this one's not too bad to do. The fascia portion that comes off is just going to be this lower black plastic, and that way you can get the bumper beam taken off and the hitch kind of lives behind that. Put the bumper beam back on and bolt it back in place. But this one did give me a little bit of issue just with some clearance, so I did have to kind of grind out one of the holes, and you may or may not have that issue depending on the tolerance of your hitch that you get. But overall, it's not too bad to do, and I'm going to walk you through all those steps to make sure you get your hitch installed. So let's take a look at that. And our first step is going to be taking our T15 Torx bit and heading over to each of the wheel wells to get some fasteners taken out. Now, there's going to be 2 of them that we're going to be taking out right here. They do continue to go up, but these are going to be the only 2 that we have to actually take out. So getting into these can be a little bit tricky. I'm using a small 1/4 inch ratchet with a bit. If you may have to kind of get clever if you don't have anything that can reach in here, but I do recommend you could actually grab a ratcheting wrench that can fit the bit and get into there. But it does get a little bit tricky just because of the clearance between the tire. So we'll go ahead and get these taken out, and then we're also going to go ahead and just repeat the same step on the other side of the vehicle. Now we're going to go ahead and take out this center panel, and you just have 2 plastic twists here, so just twist that and they should kind of pop down, and then from here we'll just go ahead and kind of pull down and out. You might have to give it a little force here. There we go. So you can see these clips kind of just snap into there, and that's going to reveal 2 more T15 Torx screws, so we'll go ahead and get these removed. So now we're going to go to our wheel well and kind of peel back the inside fender liner, and that's going to give us access to a 7mm screw that attaches this upper part of the fascia to the lower part. And what you can do is just kind of peel back on this black plastic and use either a flathead or a trim panel tool to just kind of peel that out of the way. And you can go up here a little bit as well. And that 7mm is going to be right here, and it just faces vertical. So go ahead and get your 7mm socket or a ratcheting wrench and get that removed. It is a little bit tight here, so just take your time. Now there's also a plastic clip that's going to attach this, and if you can get to it from this angle, you can definitely do that. But I found that actually you can reach it a little bit easier looking from the underside and gaining access to it. But in order to get that clip kind of pried out, you're going to want to grab a flathead or a trim panel tool. So looking up, you can reach it from peeling back that liner, but again, just to kind of get a better visual, and I think to get a tool in there, it's a lot easier to go from underneath. And you'll see that it's kind of just tucked right up here. And you'll see that this plastic clip, you're just going to want to push this part in and then raise it up. And so I'll just pry on that tab, just pushing it towards the outside of the vehicle and then kind of giving it an upward motion. And once that kind of slides up, you can pry from the top and the clip will come out pretty easily. So it kind of just looks like this. So again, just pushing on this tab allows this to pop up. So go ahead and repeat the same steps on the other side of the vehicle. Now at this point, we're going to get ready to start taking the fascia off. So I recommend having a place to put this. That way it's not going to get scratched. And if you need an extra set of hands, by all means, go ahead and grab a friend. That way you can get this knocked out. But it's pretty easy. We're just going to kind of peel back, and there's going to be kind of just a series of clips. But as I kind of pry this back, you'll be able to find each of them. So working from the outside in is definitely the way to do it. So as I mentioned here, it does have these clips. Now sometimes you may have to kind of pry along them to be able to get them all out. And I think right here, this kind of puts me in a situation where I'm going to bust out my plastic trim panel tool. So using something to kind of wedge in here to get those clips to separate can help. Be careful here, you don't want to crack any of the plastic. So just take your time. We're going to wedge this in here and see if we can't get that to separate. There we go. So you can see this kind of just snaps in. So what I did is just kind of wedge in enough to kind of create a just a little spot here to pop that out. There's no real perfect way to do it, but again, just take your time and use something that's not going to scratch up your paint. And if you need to, you can put a little bit of painter's tape in there to kind of protect that. So I'm going to go ahead, once I'm kind of at this point, I'm going to start popping it off on the other side. So now I have both sides pried off, and I think the clips are going to be about identical to these. So similar thing here, you're going to find just where those clips pop in. You can kind of see, on this car it's pretty easy because it's white. You can see kind of where they snap in, and you're going to get that resistance. So just kind of work your way along here. You know, just take your time. You can see that just kind of pries out. It's a little bit different. Actually, these clips are going to be a little bit easier. You can see this tab here. I'm able to just push that down, and that unhinges it. So I'm going to continue along here to the next one, and just kind of prying down motion pushes this to where it unsnaps. And then we'll find our next one. And it does get easier as you kind of go along. So the first one may fight you a little bit, but it's not too tricky here. And just kind of hold on to your fascia here so you don't want it to drop. Now there are going to be electrical connections too that we're going to be separating. So main thing, don't pull too hard on this. We don't want to damage those. And as we peel this back, we're going to find them pretty quickly holding this up. So we're going to go ahead and find the electrical connections and get those separated. So it looks like, as we come here, we have these plastic clips that just kind of snap in to hold the wiring. I'm going to go ahead and get those pried out, and that's going to give us a little bit more room to work on. And sometimes these, they just kind of have little ledges that catch on the plastic. So I use sometimes I got some needle nose pliers here just to kind of push that through. Again, you don't want to break these clips or anything like that. So just take your time, and then we should be able to get these to kind of pop out. Another way that you can do this is also taking your trim panel tool or a flathead and kind of prying on the backside, and that should also get it to release. So behind this fascia, there is just kind of like a plastic channel that holds the wiring in, and there's a series of metal clips that attach it in. They're kind of hard to see here. They bite into the plastic. So I think if we get this separated, it's going to make it a lot easier. So I'm just going to kind of pry on this out, and that metal clip popped off, so I'll go ahead and grab that. And it looks like there's just the two of them, and that's just going to give us a lot more room to work here and see what we're looking at. There we go. So those tabs, they're going to be kind of located right here. They just bite into this section, and that's where those metal clips popped out, so make sure you find those. And then we're still attached on this part here. So we're going to get this unplugged, and so this cover actually comes off pretty easily. You just kind of draw this out, and then we'll just follow this, and we'll see that we're plugged in here. So there is probably a little tab here that we'll just push and get this unplugged. This is kind of in the way here, so we can actually take this whole cover off if we need to. There is a Torx bit, but let's see if we can unplug this. So while looking at this, we can go ahead and unplug that and get this plastic part out of the way. But honestly, we can also just, if you have a way to kind of just move this off to the side, that's going to give us enough room to at least get our hitch in place, because it's going to bolt in underneath our bumper beam. So we will have to kind of move this up a little bit and work around the wires, but I think that ultimately is a lot easier than propping all these off to get this out of the way. So I'm going to work around this, and we're going to make this a little bit easier than having to actually unplug and remove everything. So we're going to get ready to take the bumper beam off so we can get our hitch in place, but two of the bolts on each side are actually part of the exhaust hanger bracket. So it's going to drop the exhaust down, so we want to make sure that we're supporting it. Being on a lift, I'm going to use a cam buckle strap and just kind of create a cradle between the suspension to hold up the exhaust, and that way it doesn't damage it down the way. If you're doing this at home, you can go ahead, if you're on the ground, just put a block or maybe even just a jack stand or something to support it. The main thing is we just don't want this hanging down. So next we're going to grab a 15mm socket, and we're going to go ahead and get the bottom bolts here removed, and that's part of that bracket. And then up top, there's going to be 15mm nuts. Now that is going to be tricky to get with the socket, so you might want to grab a ratcheting 15mm wrench. Now we're going to be reusing this hardware to get our hitch mounted up, so once you remove it, just kind of keep it handy. Now if you chose to leave this on, we're going to just kind of lift this up out of the way as we pull our bumper beam off. You need to make sure that those exhaust brackets are kind of out of the way, but we should be able to just kind of pull this off and just kind of wiggle it back and forth to get it off the studs. And you can see the bracket here, there's some tabs. Make sure that that is moved out of the way here. And again, that's going to drop our muffler out. There we go. And keep this close by, because this is going to go right back on. So we'll go ahead and get our hitch real quick. Now we're going to get our hitch in place using the same hardware that we took off from the bumper beam. So have your bumper beam as well as that hardware ready to go. And we'll just lift this up and get those studs placed on the top holes, so we can go ahead and lift our wiring here out of the way. Now there are some plugs here on the back side of this light, and they are kind of tight here to get this in place, but we have just enough wiggle room, and also our exhaust bracket can kind of get in the way. So just kind of get this up, tuck it in there, and just be careful of those plugs up there. But with a little maneuvering here, we should be able to get it in place. You can see my exhaust bracket wants to fight me a little here. So I got my top studs aligned. I'll just move my bracket out a little bit here, and that should allow it to drop and get in place. And then we're going to just take our bumper beam and slide that over the hitch. So same thing. So we'll go ahead and get our nuts at least hand tightened on a few threads here just to kind of support all of it. And this one's kind of tucked back here, so you may have to kind of reach in there to get that started. And then before putting the bottom bolts in place, we need to make sure that we align our exhaust bracket. Now, before we get too much further, as I went to get our bolts in place on the bottom with the exhaust brackets in place, I noticed that this was having trouble going in. And the more I look at it, I think the tolerances from the factory are just slightly off, enough to where this isn't going to want to pass through without stripping out the bolt or causing damage to the studs above. So I ended up having to grind out just a little section here to allow us to get our bolt in. So that might be something you want to do. If you're struggling to get the bolts in, don't fight it because you don't want to damage these. But take a look at that, and if you need to notch yours out a little bit, you can go ahead and do that. So now that we got that notched out and I know that our bolt is going to pass in, we'll go ahead and get our bumper beam put in place. And you might have to move the exhaust bracket a little bit to be able to do that. So with those studs pushed through, I'm going to go ahead again and take our nuts and get these hand tightened in. Now double check to make sure everything's aligned. If you need to, you can kind of adjust the bumper beam and the hitch just a little bit, but you want those holes aligned. That way we can get our bolt passed through once we get our exhaust brackets put in. So now with those nuts in place, we'll go ahead and get our exhaust hanger bolts put back in and get those hand tightened in as well. Now with everything tightened in place, I'm going to go back with my torque wrench and using the torque setting found in the instruction manual, just go through all of them. They're all going to have the same torque setting, so go ahead and get these tightened down. Now if you need a torque wrench, we have them here at eTrailer. You can generally go to an auto parts store and rent them. The bottom ones on the exhaust bracket are going to be pretty easy to get to with an extension. On the top, you may need a short well socket to be able to get to those, but go ahead and get everything torqued down properly, and then that's really going to do it for the install of the hitch. Now that our hitch is fully installed, all that's left to do is get the rest of the fascia obviously put back on. Now remember those metal clips, we're going to want to get those put back in. So you're going to slide this portion, there's a little slot here over the tab, and then once you have that pop through, take your teeth and pop that on there and it should bite into it, holding it in place. And then we're just simply going to, again, do the reverse order, just kind of pop all your clips back in, get your hardware in, and then you should be good to go. And that was a look and installation of the CURT Trailer Hitch Receiver on a 2023 Cadillac XT4.